AITA for defending my daughter's name changes, cutting my daughter off from her new friends, or letting my daughter call her aunt by the wrong name. My wife, 42F, and I, 46M, have a beautiful daughter, 15, whom we love to death. Because it's relevant, I'll mention that until about 2 years ago, she was our son. We had a lot of, I'll be charitable and say, unlearning, to do when this all happened, and it wasn't the smoothest ride for our daughter, I'm ashamed to say, but we're in a better place now and trying. Her therapist told us early on that our daughter might want to try on a few names before she found one that fit. Then our daughter proved that wrong, we thought, by jumping on one, let's say Bethany, and sticking to it. After 6 months of going by Bethany, it looked like a done deal. I just want to say here that while neither of us handled things perfectly at the start, my wife took longer to come around than I did. Bethany's birth name in particular had a personal significance to my wife, so the whole name thing has been difficult, period. August of 2019, Bethany's about to start high school and decides she wants a completely fresh start, name included. She told us she wanted to try Ellie. Then a few months later, Liz. Credit where credit's due, she was very patient with her mom and I, because this was hard. We slipped up a lot, and she'd just gently remind us. But my wife didn't handle it well. She'd get defensive or sarcastic, roll her eyes, that sort of thing. It led to a couple of arguments between her and I. Liz stuck, but then a couple of weeks ago my wife overheard a friend of our daughter online calling her another name, let's say Maggie. She confronted her about it. Turns out she'd been trying on Maggie for a while, just with friends, and had been reluctant to tell us. I wasn't there, but apparently my wife just kind of walked away with a fine, whatever, type of thing. The last couple of weeks we've been making the new name a habit, but I guess my wife's been stewing. We were all on a Zoom call with my sister, editor's note, OOP might have meant sister-in-law here, and her boys. I told her by text about the change. My younger nephew called my daughter, Liz, my sister corrected him, and my wife jokingly said, oh, let him call her what he wants, she'll have a new one next season anyway. Long story short, Zoom call awkwardly ended early, daughter went straight to her room, and I had it out with my wife. Her side, daughter can't keep changing names like this, it's hard enough for wife without all the extra changes, and she's just trying to get attention. My side, we were warned years ago this might happen, it's our daughter's decision to make, and being sarcastic and making fun of her is just going to make things worse for Maggie. So now I'm lying awake wondering if I'm an asshole. I still think I'm right, but my wife really has been trying, this aside, and we've both had our shitty moments on this. Sorry for the long read, but AITA? Edit, this has been very reassuring and eye-opening. I'm still replying to comments, but in case I nod off, thank you all. I'll be talking to my wife tomorrow morning, and if she and my daughter are okay with it, I'll try to post an update. Edit 2, holy crap. There were a couple of new comments when I checked my phone this morning, and now there are like, dozens more. My wife and I sat down, it's been a very good morning, and I'm going to write an update. Edit 3, update may or may not get approved, we'll see. Before I do that, I'll duck down and try to respond to a few comments I saw that I feel very inclined to respond to, for one reason or another. But I want to repeat how grateful I am for all of the insights, perspectives, and voices of support. So, my wife and I sat down this morning and talked. I told her I came here looking for insight and offered to show her the post, but she didn't feel like she needed to see it. Turns out she'd been thinking about it too, surprise surprise. It turns out my hunch about this whole thing was kind of right. I didn't share this yesterday because I didn't want to without my wife's permission, but the year we had Maggie, my wife's father, we'll call him George here, passed away. He'd been sick for some time and we were praying he'd live to meet his grandchild, but that didn't happen and it was devastating for my wife. When Maggie was born, we decided to name her George, obviously not her real birth name, after him. The other important thing to understand here for context is that my daughter looked so much like her grandfather. The way my wife tells it, it was like having him back in her life again, and she took a lot of comfort from that. More than either of us realized, I think. That ended up being what my wife and I talked about this morning. I mentioned all the other things that had been going so well and how they'd been bonding, and asked why the name was such a hot button, and after a bit of back and forth she kind of blurted out, every time she does it, it's like my dad died again. So, that answered a lot. We talked for a while about it, and we're nowhere near all the answers, but it looks like seeing our daughter transition brought a whole lot of grief back to the surface, and even though she's at peace with most of the transition, and loving some of it, learning a new name for Maggie stuck the knife right back in each time it happened. I'm certain there's more to it, and we talked about therapy, she's reluctant but coming around, but it's a start. After we were done and Maggie was awake we went and talked to her. My wife apologized, and we told Maggie some of what was going on. Maggie, bless her, was trying to apologize too, but we told her she had nothing to be sorry for. It was a good talk and a couple of suggestions from the last post came up. They hugged it out, there were tears, it's a start. Anyway, that's where we are now. Since I have the space, I just want to address a couple things that came up yesterday. For those who were worried my wife burned the bridge with Maggie, well, she is getting her butt kicked at Mario Kart as we speak, so I think there's hope. Big thanks to all the trans agenda excellent people who chimed in with their own experiences. That was a big help, and it made my wife relax a little knowing Maggie's experience isn't uncommon. We both know we're not quite done adjusting to our daughter's new identity, but I just wanted to reassure everyone that the conversation isn't stopping here. We had a good day after a bad day, there'll be more of them, I'm sure. I mentioned this in my replies yesterday, but for those who were wondering, Maggie's first few name choices were based on characters in games or stories she liked, but she says the one she's settled on is the first one that felt right, and there's a deeper meaning to it for her, so this might be the one that sticks. But if not, well, it's okay. Thanks again all. You're good people. My beautiful daughter, Maggie, turned 16 last month and is trans, relevant. Over the summer we moved halfway across the country. Mixed experience for Maggie. Obviously it was hard for all the usual reasons, but she was excited to start fresh. For context, she passes very well. She more or less looks young for her age. So in the lead up to September, she told us that she didn't want to be out at her new school. She wanted people to just know her as a girl, not as a trans girl. I admit, my wife and I weren't sure what to make of this, but she seemed happy. She quickly made friends with several other girls her age, especially one girl, Brittany, important soon. Things were going smoothly, and we relaxed a bit. Then Friday I get a text from Maggie's best friend back home, we'll call her Jenna, asking either me or my wife to call her, and not to tell Maggie yet. Basically, Maggie has been hanging out with both Jenna and Brittany online, and Brittany would sometimes say very transphobic things, along the lines of trans women not being real women, or they're gross, you get the idea, and Maggie would laugh along and agree. Apparently Jenna privately called her out, and Maggie begged her not to say anything or out her, said Brittany was an amazing friend otherwise, so on. Jenna, bless her heart, didn't want to be cut off from Maggie, so she agreed. So then last week they were hanging out and Brittany made a comment about some pervert at school, and Maggie tries to change the subject but it all comes out anyway. There's another trans girl at the school and Brittany has been bullying her. In front of her with friends. Including Maggie. And Maggie has done nothing to help this poor girl or distance herself from Brittany. This led to a massive fight between Jenna and Maggie, and they haven't spoken since. Now Jenna figures if she can't salvage her friendship with Maggie, she can at least maybe help her by telling us. I exploded. I don't have room for details, but I tore a strip off Maggie for being a part of this, confiscated her phone, grounded her, and told her never to speak to Brittany or that group again. This shot her weekend plans to hell. It's been 2 days, and she hasn't spoken to me since. My wife has been on my team in front of Maggie and is horrified by what's been going on, but she thinks that we can't expect to forbid teenagers from seeing one another, and I've now cut Maggie off from some of the only friends she has out here. But I just don't get it. I've tried talking to her, but she just won't and I don't want to push her too hard. Her mother convinced her to bump up her next appointment with her therapist, grudgingly, but otherwise she hasn't had much luck either and she thinks we made a mistake. So, here I am. I feel badly for the way I reacted, but I also don't see how else I could have. My little girl is enabling a transphobic bully, and I don't see how she can live with herself. Every time I think about it I just see red. AITA? Edit, reading everything here helped. I appreciate all of you. My wife has just opened the post to read for herself too. We will be sitting down and talking with Maggie today, and I will apologize for the way I reacted, and we'll go from there. I'm terrified about what I might hear, but if I can help it, I can't just let her go back to school with all this. Edit 2, a few folks may have missed this in my post. Yes, she does have a therapist that she sees regularly. That was one of the first things we did when she came out to us. As I mentioned above, we're getting her an urgent appointment to help her deal with this. Edit 3, update. I sat down with her and apologized for losing my temper. I told her I wasn't mad anymore, just scared for her, and that I wanted to help. I said we would need to solve this, but we'd do it together, and that my wife and I would give her a little time to think about it, if she needed it. And then she just about disintegrated. She was sobbing and couldn't even get words out. Her mom and I held her and let her cry it out. After that I asked if she was ready to talk about it, and she said she wanted a little space first to put herself together, but she said she knows how much of a mess this is and that it needs fixing. So that's where we are now. We're letting her collect herself and calm down, and I'm typing this while her mom puts together a late lunch for her, and after she's eaten we'll talk and go from there. Not sure if I'll be able to update, but I'll try. Thank you again everyone for your help and insight. Hi folks. I'm updating here because I think this update will probably end up being too long to add to my original post, and I know I don't meet the update criteria, but I thought I'd fill in those of you who were concerned. I do have Maggie's permission to share. So, after Maggie had her cool down and her lunch, her mom and I sat down and hashed everything out. Before I go any further, I'm going to do what a few other commenters on the post did and give a shout out to Jenna. For what she already did, yes, but there's more. Maggie evidently put 2 and 2 together, figured out Jenna was the one who told us what was going on, and sent her an irate message, on her laptop, which we'd let her keep because homework. She showed us the message. I'm not going to quote it here, but suffice it to say it was pretty long and ugly, sent the same night I'd gone off on her. Probably would have been a friendship ender to anyone else. Not Jenna, bless her. 3 paragraphs of awful, and Jenna's response was, "Are you okay? Do you need to talk?" Which they did, yesterday. I think Mags gave her the silent treatment until then, she didn't say. They got on a call, they talked, they cried. And they're good now, pending how all this turns out, and I mean, who can blame Jenna for that? But Maggie did say, with lots of difficulty, that she was feeling trapped in a no-win situation and had been so scared of us finding out about this Britney thing because she didn't think we'd understand and we'd probably hit the roof. Oops. I think she had it in her head that she could get through to Britney and work it all out. Fix her, you know. So when we did find out, the whole thing came crashing down. Most of the folks who commented on my post were right on the money, and I'm ashamed I didn't see it, or maybe take the time to think about it, before I got so angry the other day. She and Britney were well into their friendship, and Maggie was very much part of the group before any of this came up, and once it did, Maggie was so terrified of what would happen if she were outed that she felt all she could do was play along. But of course there's more. It turns out the other trans girl, the victim, she needs a name, so I'm calling her Emily, is a new kid, on top of everything else, and from the sound of it, an impressive new kid. She transferred to Maggie's school toward the beginning of December, around the time Jenna started noticing the off-color comments. And apparently Emily is out and proud. Like, trans flag buttons on her shirt proud. But there's more, strap in. I mentioned in 1 or 2 comments that I spent some of the weekend getting a hold of Britney's parents, and that they were a collective piece of work. What I found out was that they have been repeatedly complaining to the school about Emily, playing the role of concerned parents, because of all the usual bullshit reasons, pardon my French. Props to the school here because it sounds like Britney's folks were politely told to go make sweet love to a tree stump, I might be paraphrasing, and that Emily has as much of a right to her identity as anyone else. So, of course, enter Britney, and anyone who will listen to her. The way Maggie tells it, at first it was just Britney making the odd comment here and there, about her parents or Emily or whatever. We did pause here and stress how much we wished Maggie could have talked to us then, and she agreed that it might not have gotten this bad, but she, you know, thought she could fix it. Then we were on winter break, then COVID shut down the school for a week and classes were online, so it wasn't until just last week that things got particularly ugly. I was relieved to hear that there were only 2 incidents Maggie witnessed. One was a throwaway comment as Britney et al. Passed Emily in a hallway. The other, the one that sparked this whole thing, was a day or 2 after that, started a similar way, in passing outside the building, and Emily stopped this time and called Britney out. They got into it, words were exchanged, Maggie just kind of froze. Apparently Emily called the lot of them, transphobic B********s, and that hit Maggie pretty hard. She also told us she hadn't really meant to be completely stealth at first, more so just that she wouldn't bring it up, and if someone asked, she wouldn't lie. But, again, comments, chef's kiss, she got caught up in the excitement of being seen as a CIS girl, and then all this happened before the subject came up. Christ, this is a lot. Sorry. All that pretty much brings us to this weekend, where things went south. I think the fact that I blew up the way I did kind of put things in perspective for her, like, she knew I'd be mad about all this, but that mad, apparently not, but as I said, she was scared of losing Britney, scared of being outed, and thought she could fix it. So then we found out about today, and Maggie had to stop and cry again because she was so afraid to show us.